So, the auctioneer's voice, the fast-talking kind you only see in movies, echoes through this huge, empty living room. My living room, technically. He slams this little wooden gavel down and shouts sold. For $1.2 million to the gentleman in the back. And yeah, that gentleman was me. Standing there in a suit I probably overpaid for, holding a bidding paddle. And the house I just bought? It was my childhood home. The very same house my parents had kicked me out of just 6 months earlier. The reason they kicked me out? So my golden child brother and his pregnant wife could turn my bedroom into a nursery. They called me selfish for objecting. Selfish. Oh, you are absolutely going to want to hear how we got here. Trust me. Let's rewind. 6 months and a lifetime ago. I'm Alex, I'm 24. I work in tech, make decent money, and I'm a saver. Like, annoyingly so. I track my expenses in a spreadsheet. My big goal was to save up a massive down payment for a house of my own. To fast-track that goal, I was still living at home with my parents. It wasn't ideal, but it was practical. I paid them $800 a month for my room and board, never missed a payment, kept to myself, and was basically the perfect, low-maintenance son. The wallpaper in my life was beige, and I liked it that way. Then there's my brother, Kevin. He's 28, 4 years older, and he's not a saver. He's the star of the family, the one with the dazzling smile and the string of failed, once-in-a-lifetime business opportunities. My parents saw him as a charismatic risk-taker. I saw a guy who was perpetually bailed out of trouble. They had remortgaged their house about 5 years back to fund his artisanal, small-batch, gluten-free dog biscuit company. It went under in 6 months. The dog biscuits were, apparently, terrible. But Kevin just shrugged it off, charmed his way into another sales job, and married his high school sweetheart, Jessica. Jess was fine, I guess, if your type is someone who thinks having a live, laugh, love sign in every room counts as a personality. Kevin and Jess had been living with her parents since they got married, supposedly saving up. But now, all of a sudden, they were on the move. The whole thing started, as most family disasters do, at a Sunday dinner. Mom had made her famous pot roast, which is usually a sign that she's about to ask for something. We're all making small talk when Kevin clears his throat, puts his arm around Jess, and announces, well, we have some news. We're pregnant. Okay, cool. I was happy for them. Genuinely. I was going to be an uncle. There were hugs, some happy tears from my mom. It was nice. Then Kevin drops the other shoe. And Jess's parents are selling their house and moving to Florida, so we need a new place to live, like, next month. I figured they'd get an apartment. It made sense. They both had jobs. But my dad just puffed out his chest and said, nonsense. You're not wasting money on rent. You're moving in here. There's plenty of room. I smiled. Great. The guest room was a little small, but they could make it work. It would be cozy. That's when all eyes in the room slowly turned to me. A cold, heavy feeling started to pool in my stomach. Alex, my mom started, her voice syrupy sweet. Kevin and Jess are going to need a proper space for the baby. A nursery. And your room is the biggest one, besides ours. It gets the best afternoon light. I just stared at her, waiting for the punchline. There was no punchline. My dad jumped in. So, we're going to move you down to the office in the basement. It'll be great. Like your own little bachelor pad. The office in the basement was a concrete box. It was maybe 8 by 10 feet, had no window, a single exposed light bulb, and it always smelled vaguely of damp towels and regret. It was where we stored the Christmas decorations and the spiders held their annual conventions. A bachelor pad. Seriously? I tried to be calm. I really did. I took a breath and said, wait a second. I pay rent. I pay $800 a month specifically for my room. The basement isn't a bedroom. The atmosphere in the room went from 60 to 0 in a heartbeat. Jess's eyes started to well up. Kevin looked at me like I had just personally insulted his unborn child. My mom was the first to speak. She put her fork down, her face a mask of disappointment. Alexander, do not be selfish. This is for your new niece. It's about family. We need to support Kevin and Jessica right now. Selfish. That was the word they chose. For wanting to keep the room I paid for. for not wanting to live in a glorified dungeon so my brother, the 28-year-old financial black hole, could have a free ride. This wasn't about a room. This was about my place in the family. I was the responsible one, the stable one. In their eyes, that meant I was the one who could be pushed aside. My comfort, my money, my space, it was all just a resource they could redirect to Kevin whenever he needed it. I said no. I'm not moving into the basement. And that's how the war began. The first phase of their attack was the invasion. I came home from work a few days later and heard voices coming from my room. I opened the door to find my mom and Jess standing in the middle of my bedroom with a tape measure and a little notepad. And the crib can go right here, against this wall, once we get all of Alex's junk out of the way, Jess was saying. They both froze when they saw me. My mom gave me a bright, fake smile. Oh, hi, sweetie. Jess and I were just brainstorming. Getting some ideas for the nursery. Brainstorming, I repeated, looking at the 2 moving boxes on my bed that were already filled with my books and some of my clothes. Looks more like you're packing. Well, we figured we'd give you a head start, she chirped. It's a big job. I felt my blood pressure spike. I looked at Jess. Jess, this is my room. I've said I'm not moving. You can't just come in here and start packing my things. Her lips started to tremble. I just wanted to feel excited about my baby's first room, she whispered, like she was the victim here. That's when my dad appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of conflict. He took one look at Jess's teary face and then glared at me. Alex, what is your problem? You're stressing Jessica out. That's not good for the baby. It was masterful, really. In the span of 30 seconds, I had gone from the person whose privacy was being violated to the monster who was actively harming his unborn niece. They were a united front, and I was the enemy. I told them all to get out of my room. The argument echoed through the house for an hour, ending with my dad shouting, "This is our house, Alex. Our rules." It was a stalemate, but I knew it was far from over. Next came the guilt trip campaign. My phone started blowing up. Texts from my mom at all hours. I can't believe you're tearing our family apart over something so petty. You're breaking your father's heart. Jessica is so upset she couldn't eat her dinner. Kevin called me. He didn't shout. It was worse. He used that wounded, disappointed voice. I don't get it, man. I thought we were brothers. I'd do anything for you. Why are you trying to ruin this for me? This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life. I tried to explain. Kev, it's not about you. It's about them kicking me into a concrete bunker. I pay rent. Why can't you guys take the guest room? The guest room is too small for a nursery, Alex. You know that. God, you're just thinking about yourself. Click. He hung up. Then came the social media attacks. Vague booking at its finest. Jess posted a picture of a sonogram with the caption, trying to stay positive and create a loving home for our little miracle, even when some family members aren't being supportive. So blessed for the ones who are there for us. The comments section was a flood of sympathy from her friends and our extended family, who had only heard their side of the story. My Aunt Carol called me. Alex, honey, I heard you were giving your parents a hard time. You know, family is everything. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices. Sacrifices. I was making a sacrifice every month by living at home and handing over my hard-earned money so I could save for my future. They were the ones who had sacrificed nothing. But I was the selfish one. The narrative was set. I was the bad guy. I held my ground. I paid my rent on the first of the month, as always. I figured if I just kept my head down, they'd eventually have to give up and find an apartment. I was wrong. They escalated. My dad sat me down a week later. Alex, your mother and I have been talking. Since you want to treat this situation like a business arrangement, we'll do that. I felt a sliver of hope. Maybe they were going to be reasonable. Your rent is increasing, he said, not looking at me. Effective immediately. It's now $2,400 a month. I just stared at him, my mouth hanging open. It was triple my current rent. It was more than the mortgage payment on a small condo. It was absurd. It was punitive. What? Why? I finally managed to sputter. For the inconvenience, he said, his voice cold. And for the market value of the room plus the emotional distress you're causing your mother. If you want to act like a tenant instead of a son, then we'll treat you like one. Pay up or get out. That was the moment I knew I was done. They didn't see me as their son. They saw me as an obstacle, an ATM, an inconvenience that needed to be squeezed until I either complied or left. My relationship with my parents, the one I thought we had, was an illusion. It was transactional, and I had just found out my side of the ledger was worthless. Fine, I said. My voice was quiet, but it was steady. I'll be out by the end of the month. The look on his face was a mixture of shock and triumph. He thought he'd won. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. I found an apartment in 2 days. It was small, but it was mine. For the next 2 weeks, I moved my stuff out piece by piece while they were at work or out. I took everything. My bed, my desk, my posters off the wall. I left the room a sterile, empty box. I didn't tell them I was leaving until the last day. I just left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I've moved out. Here are my keys. My new address is not your concern." I also left a check for the prorated rent for the month, down to the exact day. A final, petty little twist of the knife. I blocked all of their numbers except for my mom's, just in case of a true emergency. I needed space. I needed to breathe. For a few weeks, there was silence. It was glorious. I started to relax, to feel like I had escaped. Then came the breaking point. The moment that turned this from a sad family drama into something else entirely. I had left my old bike in the garage, and my friend wanted to borrow it. I figured enough time had passed. I shot my mom a text, "Hey, need to grab my bike from the garage. Can I swing by tomorrow around 7 p.m. when I know you're home?" She replied almost instantly, "Of course, sweetie. We miss you." The next night, I pulled up to the house. It felt weird, like visiting a museum of my own life. I let myself into the garage with the code I knew they'd never change. I was grabbing my bike when I heard voices from the kitchen. The door was slightly ajar. It was my parents and Kevin. I should have just left. But I froze. And I listened. "Is he gone?" Kevin asked. "Yeah, he just got his bike." "He didn't even come inside," my mom said, her voice dripping with fake sadness. Then her tone changed. It became sharp, conspiratorial. "Okay, so, did you talk to the bank?" My dad sighed. "I did. They're not willing to refinance again. We're 3 months behind, honey. After we covered Kevin's car payments and that credit card debt." My blood ran cold. They were in financial trouble. Deep trouble. Kevin's voice was whiny. "It's not my fault. That supplier screwed me over. How are we supposed to get a house for the baby if we can't even get our finances straight?" And then my mom said the words that would change everything. "Don't you worry, sweetie," she said, her voice like poison. "Alex has all that money saved up. Tens of thousands of dollars. He's just sitting on it. We'll call him next week. We'll tell him there's a family emergency, that the house is in trouble. We'll ask to borrow his down payment. He's a good boy. He'll give it to us. He owes us that much for being so difficult about the room." I felt the air leave my lungs. It was a physical blow. They weren't just kicking me out. They weren't just emotionally blackmailing me. They were actively, consciously plotting to steal my entire life savings. The money I had worked so hard for, the money I had saved by living under their roof and putting up with their crap. They saw it as theirs. An extension of the family bank account, which really meant the bank of Kevin. And my brother, the golden child? He didn't object. He didn't say, "No, we can't do that to him." He said, "Okay, but make sure you get all of it." I saw a perfect starter home over in Maple Creek. I saw red. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was something colder, clearer. It was the absolute, final death of any love or obligation I felt towards them. They had drawn the line. They had defined our relationship. It was business. And I was about to become the world's most ruthless businessman. I backed out of the garage silently, my bike forgotten. I got in my car and drove. I didn't know where I was going, but my mind was racing, forming a plan. A crazy, audacious, and frankly, beautiful plan. They wanted a family emergency? I was going to give them one. The first thing I did the next morning was call a lawyer who specialized in real estate and debt. I explained the situation. He was silent for a moment, and then he let out a low whistle. "That's bold," he said. "But it might just be possible." The second thing I did was something I never thought I'd do. I took my entire life savings, every penny I had scraped together for my down payment, and I put it to work. Based on what I'd overheard, I knew my parents had remortgaged the house years ago to fund Kevin's dog biscuit fiasco. They were struggling. I had my lawyer contact the bank. Not as their son, but as an independent investor. We made them an offer. We would buy my parents' mortgage debt from the bank at a slight discount. For the bank, it was a great deal. They got a problem loan off their books without the headache and expense of a foreclosure. For me, it was the ultimate gamble. After a few weeks of negotiation, the bank agreed. Just like that, I, Alex, the selfish son, became the legal holder of my parents' mortgage. I owned their debt. They had no idea. They were still sending their late payments to the bank, completely oblivious that the money was now being forwarded to an account controlled by me. For the next 2 months, I did nothing. I just watched. They defaulted on another payment. Then another. The official foreclosure notices started getting sent out. Just as I predicted, my phone rang. It was my mom, sobbing hysterically. Alex. Oh, Alex, it's a nightmare. The bank is foreclosing on the house. We're going to lose everything. There was a mix-up with the payments, and now they won't listen. I played my part. Oh my God, Mom, that's terrible. What can I do? We need money, sweetie, she cried. For a lawyer, and to get caught up. Remember all that money you saved? We need to borrow it. It's a family emergency. The words were so perfect, so exactly what I had heard them plotting, that I almost laughed. The sheer audacity. I let out a heavy, dramatic sigh. Mom, I can't. I'm so sorry. I just moved all my savings into a long-term investment. Like a special kind of bond. I can't touch it for 5 years without losing almost all of it. The timing is just, it's terrible. I'm so sorry. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as she realized her golden parachute was gone. Her voice was flat dead. Oh, I see. They spent the next month scrambling, trying to get loans, begging relatives. But their credit was shot. No one would help them. The foreclosure was unstoppable. The date was set for the public auction. Which brings us back to the beginning. The day of the auction was gray and overcast, which felt fitting. I parked down the street and walked up to the house. My house. My parents, Kevin, and a very pregnant Jess were standing on the lawn, looking broken. They were huddled together, watching as a small crowd of bargain hunters and real estate agents gathered. They saw me, and their expressions soured. What are you doing here? Kevin spat, walking over to me. Did you come to gloat? To enjoy the show. I looked him right in the eye. Something like that, I said, and walked past him to register for the auction. I got my paddle. Number 72. The auction started. The auctioneer began his rapid-fire chant. The bidding started low. 100,000. 200. It crawled upwards. My parents were watching with dead eyes. At 900,000, the bidding started to stall. The auctioneer scanned the crowd. 900,000, going once, going twice. I raised my paddle. 1 million, I said, my voice clear and steady. A hush fell over the crowd. All heads turned to me. My family's jaws literally dropped. Kevin's face went white. My mom looked like she was going to faint. Another bidder, a developer in a cheap suit, countered. 1.1 million. I didn't hesitate. 1.2. The developer shook his head and stepped back. He was out. The auctioneer beamed. He looked around. $1.2 million. Going once, going twice. Sold. For $1.2 million to the gentleman in the back. I walked to the front to sign the preliminary paperwork. My hands weren't even shaking. I felt calm. Vindicated. When I was done, I walked over to my shell-shocked family. Jess was openly sobbing now. My dad just stared at the house, his face ashen. You bought our house? My mom whispered, her voice trembling. My house, I corrected her gently. I bought my house. Kevin finally found his voice. It was a strangled, furious squeak. How? How could you do this? This was supposed to be our money. The money you were supposed to lend us. And there it was. The admission. The confirmation that they felt entitled to my future. I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. You mean the money you were planning to trick me out of? I overheard you. That night in the kitchen. The family emergency plot. You thought I was selfish for wanting to keep my own bedroom, a room I paid rent for. You decided I wasn't a son, I was just a resource to be tapped for your convenience. So, I decided to take you at your word. This was just a business transaction. I pulled the newly cut keys from my pocket and dangled them in front of him. You needed a place for the baby, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. But you can't have this one. You made your choice when you decided my future was less important than your comfort. Now I've made mine. The law requires I give you 30 days to vacate the premises. I looked at each of them. My mother, my father, my brother. Strangers who happened to share my DNA. Get out of my house. The aftermath was exactly as messy as you'd imagine. They tried to rally the family against me, painting me as a sociopathic monster who threw his pregnant sister-in-law and aging parents onto the street. But this time, I had the full story. And the receipts. When Aunt Carol called to scream at me, I calmly explained how they had plotted to take my savings after kicking me out. The calls stopped pretty quickly after that. They didn't leave in 30 days, of course. I had to have them legally evicted. The sheriff literally escorted them off the property while they screamed about how I was ungrateful. They ended up in a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment across town. The baby, a little girl, was born a month later. From what I hear, they're miserable. The golden child, Kevin, actually has to pay bills for the first time in his life, and he doesn't like it one bit. They try to sue me, claiming emotional distress and fraudulent acquisition. My lawyer laughed them out of the courtroom. Everything I did was 100% legal. I just used the system they created. I spent the next year renovating the house. I gutted the kitchen, put in hardwood floors. I turned the damp basement office into a badass home theater. And my old room? My supposedly perfect nursery? I turned it into the ultimate home office and gaming setup, with a top-of-the-line PC and 3 monitors. Every time I sat in that chair, I smiled. About a year after the auction, I sold the house. The market had gone up, and with the renovations, I made a profit of nearly $500,000. I took that money, the original savings they tried to steal plus the profit I made from their downfall, and I bought my actual dream home in a city 100 miles away. It has a big yard, a nice kitchen, and an incredible view. Best of all, it has no memories attached. My mom tried to call a few months ago. I didn't recognize the number, so I picked up. She was crying, talking about forgiveness and how family makes mistakes. I listened patiently until she was done. Then I said, "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose my brother over me. You chose his comfort over my security. I'm just living with the consequences of your choice. And frankly, I've never been happier. I wish you the best." I hung up and I blocked the number. So yeah, that's the story of how being called selfish led to me owning, evicting my entire family from, and then flipping my childhood home for a massive profit. Family, am I right? It was a wild, painful, and ultimately liberating ride. The peace I have now is priceless. And if you think that's insane, you should hear about what happened when my cousin tried to become my roommate in my new house without asking. But that's a story for another time. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because you are not going to want to miss it.